I arrived an hour early, just like always. Mom greeted me with a tired smile and handed me a dish towel. We moved in a quiet rhythm, chopping, stirring, setting the table. But something was off. She wasn't humming her usual holiday tunes. Her hands trembled when she carved the cranberry mold. Dad sat in the living room flipping through the news, his jaw clenched like it was carved from stone. No hello, not even a glance. When Megan walked in, she offered a quick nod but avoided my eyes. Her phone stayed glued to her palm. Chris didn't come at all, claiming car trouble in a group text. The turkey browned in the oven, but the air was already burnt with tension. We sat down anyway. I passed the mashed potatoes to Dad. He ignored them, cleared his throat. Then he stood up his chair, scraping against the wood with a shriek. "I'm not letting this go another minute," he said. Voice steady but loud enough to silence forks midair. "Return the 50,000, Julia. Or you'll never see your mother again." I blinked, laughed once out of instinct. "I'm sorry, what?" He jabbed a finger toward me. "You think I don't know? It was our joint account. You helped me set up the online banking, and then it disappeared." Mom kept her head down. "You think I stole from you?" I asked. "No, from your mother." That landed like a slap. Megan finally looked up. "It makes sense," she muttered. "You're the one with access. You always play innocent." I looked at Mom. Her lips trembled, but she didn't say a word. My ears rang. My heart pounded, not from guilt, but rage. I'd spent my life protecting other people's money. Now my own family thought I'd betrayed them. Dad leaned in. "You have until the end of this meal to come clean." He said it loud in front of everyone, but I didn't flinch. I just reached for my phone. A month ago, Dad called me in frustration. He couldn't remember a password and was locked out of his bank account again. "I need to get with the times," he'd said, half joking, half defeated. So I spent a Saturday morning at their kitchen table walking him through online banking. Showed him how to set up two-factor authentication, taught him what phishing emails look like. He scribbled notes in block letters and gave me a tired smile. "Don't know how you keep all this in your head." It never crossed my mind that this act of help would paint a target on my back. Now, at the Thanksgiving table, that same man stared at me like a stranger, like a criminal. Chris's voice cut in over the silence. "You've always been the golden child, Julia." "You think we don't notice?" "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my tone even. He leaned forward, eyes hard. "You walk around with your fancy job title and your ethics, but you're not above temptation. 50 grand is a lot even for you." I blinked at him. "You think I need $50,000 from Mom and Dad?" Megan crossed her arms. "We're not stupid. It disappeared right after you got Dad online." I looked to Mom, but she couldn't meet my eyes. That hurt more than the words. The room felt like a stage. They'd rehearsed this, practiced their outrage. I glanced at Megan's arm and noticed the handbag dangling from her chair, designer brand new. She worked part-time at a bookstore. Then I remembered Chris's Instagram post from 2 weeks ago. A shiny new Tesla with the caption, "Deserved this." I dismissed it at the time. But now the math wasn't adding up, and I wasn't the one with something to hide. I took a breath. The familiar instinct kicked in, not fear, but focus. The way it always did when a case cracked open. They thought I came unprepared, but they forgot what I do for a living. I opened the encrypted folder on my phone with steady fingers. The room buzzed with tension, but I moved like I was in the middle of an audit, methodical, precise, detached. It was the only way to survive what was coming. "Since you're all so sure," I said, voice low but clear, "let's look at what actually happened." I tapped the screen. The first video loaded. First Union Bank, October 3rd. 7:10 p.m. The footage was crystal clear, downloaded directly from the bank's surveillance system. Chris appeared on the screen, standing at the teller's window. Navy vest, black baseball cap, his usual weekend look. He handed something to the teller, then glanced back at someone out of frame. Then Megan stepped into view, scrolling on her phone like always. Only this time she was peeking nervously over the screen, clearly agitated. The timestamp glowed in the corner. $20,000 was withdrawn that day. Dad leaned forward, his brows furrowed. Megan froze, her hands trembling slightly. I swiped to the next clip. October 8th. Different day, same location. Another withdrawal this time. $15,000. Megan did most of the talking while Chris stood behind her nodding at intervals. They moved quickly like they didn't want to be noticed. Then the final clip. October 12th, 11:06 a.m. Megan alone. Wearing the red jacket I now saw draped over the back of her dining chair. She handed over an ID, signed a form, and walked out with a white envelope. 3 withdrawals, 3 visits, 3 pieces of a puzzle they never expected me to solve. I also have these, I said, reaching into my bag and placing a folder on the table. I slid out 3 withdrawal slips, signed with what looks like Mom's name, but it's off. The slant, the pressure, the spacing. I let the silence linger. These signatures were analyzed by my firm's forensic team. They're close, but not quite. The forgery is good, but it's not her. Dad's eyes hadn't moved from the screen. Chris had gone pale. Megan swallowed hard. Bank footage like this is digitally watermarked and redundantly stored, I added. It can't be edited without detection. Megan tried to speak. This isn't you tried to frame me, I said, and almost succeeded. The silence was louder than the footage, especially when Mom finally looked up and gasped. Dad shook his head slow at first, then faster. No, that doesn't make sense. That footage, anyone could be wearing those clothes. Except they're not just clothes, I said evenly. They're your clothes, Chris. Your vest, your Phillies cap. Megan's red North Face jacket. I didn't just recognize them. I pulled images from your own social media. Same outfit, same day. Megan's hands covered her face. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she mumbled between uneven breaths. It was supposed to be temporary, we were going to put it back. Chris snapped, don't say anything else. Then he looked at Dad. Come on, Dad, she's twisting this. She's just showing you what she wants you to see. I didn't look away. You want more, fine. I slid another folder across the table. This is the timeline. Mom was in the hospital getting preliminary scans for her surgery. You stayed overnight with her, remember? Dad's brow furrowed. Your wallet was on the bedside table, I continued. That's where your passwords were handwritten on a notepad. You told me yourself you kept them there. Megan's lip quivered. Chris stayed stone still. And the day after Mom was discharged, that's when I helped you set up online access, after they already had your credentials. Dana hadn't said a word until now. She stared at Chris like he'd grown horns. You told me the account had some unusual activity, she said, voice cracking. That it was probably just a glitch. You said it was missing, not stolen. Chris wouldn't meet her eyes. Dana stood up slowly, pushing her chair back with both hands. She didn't yell, didn't cry, just reached down and picked up her coat. Then Caleb's. No drama, no parting shots. She walked out with their coats, I thought, watching her slip on her jacket. Not out of anger, but shame. The next morning, the cold November wind bit through my coat as I stepped into the corner cafe. Dana was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept, eyes swollen, hair tied back in a loose knot coat, still buttoned like she hadn't decided whether to stay or go. Thanks for coming, she said softly as I sat down. I nodded. How's Caleb? She gave a tired sigh, scared, quiet. He wouldn't even come downstairs this morning. We sat in silence for a few moments, steam rising between us. I need to tell you something, Dana said, finally looking down at her coffee. Chris has been gambling again. Cards, sports apps, even crypto. It started small, just casual, just to take the edge off. At least that's what he told me. My stomach sank. I thought he quit. After the rehab. He did, for a while. But it crept back. He hid it from me for months. Then one day I found a receipt from an ATM inside a casino. When I confronted him, he swore it was a one-time thing. But by then the debt had piled up. I stared at her. So the money, he used it to catch up on his lines of credit. And Megan helped. Said if it bought them time, it was worth it. I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. And the part about me framing me, Dana hesitated. then nodded slowly. He told Caleb to lie. Said it was just a story to help protect the family. Told him if the police ever asked he saw you leaving the bank. Caleb didn't understand what it meant. But when I found out last night, he confessed everything. I closed my eyes. I'm leaving him, she said quietly. I can't let Caleb grow up thinking this is what family looks like. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. There were no words big enough for the ache in my chest. I thought the betrayal was personal, but it had become generational. The door to Dad's study was half closed, but I heard the creak of his old leather chair before I knocked. Come in, he muttered, not looking up. Books were scattered on the desk, untouched. His reading glasses sat lopsided on a tax folder, unopened. The blinds were drawn. In the dim light, he looked smaller, like the weight of everything had finally caught up. I stood in the doorway for a moment, then stepped inside. You haven't said much. He didn't turn around. What is there to say? Island stretched between us. I didn't want to believe it, he said finally. Still don't, not completely, I swallowed. Even after the footage, he exhaled sharp and bitter. They're my kids too, Julia. All of you are. I keep thinking, where did I go wrong? I stayed quiet, letting him unravel at his own pace. I was angry, he admitted. At everything, your mom's health, the way life's been slipping out of my control. And you, his voice cracked. You've always had your life together, clean, confident, people respect you. I guess part of me wanted to find a crack in the armor, something that made you human. I blinked. So when the money vanished and you were the one who had helped me set it up, it was easier to believe the worst. It made the chaos feel simple. The door creaked again. We both turned. Mom stood there, one hand on the frame, the other pressed against her chest. You pointed at the wrong person, Richard, she said softly, and you knew it the moment you saw her face. His shoulders sagged. I didn't want to believe they could do that to us. To her. She didn't deserve that, Mom whispered. He nodded slowly, tears brimming, but not falling. No, she didn't. He stepped toward her, tentative, like a man approaching the edge of something steep. I'm sorry, Lorraine, he said, voice breaking. I failed you. I failed us. She didn't speak, just took his hand. I watched from the corner of the room, heart heavy. For the first time, my father apologized, but not to me, to her. The formal complaint had already been submitted. I had walked Mom through it step by step, making sure she understood every line before she signed. The bank's fraud department had reviewed the evidence. The police were involved now. There was no turning back. Dad sat at the kitchen table, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Julia, please, he said. We can still fix this internally. We don't need to ruin their lives. I shook my head. They already did that themselves. He looked at Mom, his voice strained. Lorraine, there are children. Family doesn't belong in prison. Mom stirred her tea slowly, then looked up. Her voice didn't waver. They stopped being family when they stole from us. And when they tried to destroy Julia to cover it up. The doorbell rang. Chris and Megan stood on the porch, both disheveled, both shaken. Megan's mascara was smudged. Chris looked like he hadn't slept. We just want to talk, Megan said quickly. Please, Mom. 5 minutes, Mom said, stepping aside. They sat in the living room like guests in a stranger's home. No one offered them water. We messed up, Chris began. But this doesn't need to go to court. We can pay it back. We'll find a way. I've already started liquidating things, Megan added. My car, my savings. You forged signatures, I said. You lied to the police. You involved Caleb. Chris stiffened. He's a kid. He doesn't understand. That's not an excuse, Mom snapped. Chris leaned forward. You press charges and you'll never see your grandson again. I swear to God, Mom. The air in the room turned thick. For a moment I thought she might crack, but she stood instead, calm, steady. You just made another mistake, Chris, she said. Because if you think you can use that boy to shield yourself, you don't deserve to see him either. Chris's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked him straight in the eye. You threatened again, you'll never see your grandson. And this time, Mom said, then I'll see him in court. The courtroom was cold, all marble and formality. I sat beside Mom in the second row, our coats folded over our laps, our hands knotted together. Dad was a few seats away, silent, his eyes fixed forward. He hadn't said much since the arraignment. Chris sat at the defendant's table in a wrinkled navy suit. Megan wore black, her hair pulled back like a schoolgirl facing the principal. The weight of reality clung to them both, no more defiance, no more spin. When the judge called their names, neither looked back. The prosecutor read the plea deal. Chris Brennan guilty on counts of fraud and conspiracy to commit identity theft. 18 months in state prison. Megan Brennan guilty of second-degree identity theft and forgery. 14 months, both with restitution required. I watched Chris's jaw tighten as the sentence was confirmed. He nodded once like someone conceding a game he knew he couldn't win. Megan sniffled but didn't cry. Her hands were trembling in her lap. Dad exhaled slowly as if trying to breathe out the years it had taken to raise them. I didn't know what part of this broke him most, the shame, the courtroom, or the finality of hearing his children referred to by docket numbers. The bailiff stepped forward. Chris stood, shoulders squared but eyes unfocused. Megan followed, smaller, now thinner than I remembered. Neither one said a word as they were led toward the side exit. Mom gripped my hand tighter. She didn't blink. Outside, the cameras were already waiting. A reporter scribbled into a notepad. I turned my face away. Inside, the judge dismissed us. This court stands in recess. We stood. Mom's knees wobbled slightly as she rose, but she kept her head high. Dad remained seated. They forged her signature, I thought, glancing at the man who had once doubted me without hesitation. But they couldn't forge integrity. 6 months passed. The trees outside Mom's house had turned green again, and so had her spirit. Her knee surgery had gone better than expected, and she was now walking laps around the block like she had something to prove. Physical therapy had become her social circle. She laughed more now. I'd been promoted to senior manager in my department. The irony wasn't lost on me. Exposing financial fraud in my own family had fast-tracked my reputation in ways I hadn't asked for. But I took the raise, took the office, and tried not to feel hollow when people called me resilient. Every Friday, without fail, 2 envelopes arrived at my apartment. One in Chris's jagged block handwriting, one in Megan's curly script. Sometimes they were long, other times just a few lines. I never opened them. Instead, I placed each one gently in a box I'd labeled history and slid it under my bed. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't destruction either. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Caleb came over often. He didn't say much about his parents, and I never pushed. But we'd bake together or watch old cartoons or sit silently doing our own thing. He didn't need an aunt who asked questions. He needed one who showed up. Dana had moved into a modest 2-bedroom in the next town over. She was teaching again. She smiled easier now. We went for brunch twice a month like it had always been part of our routine. Sometimes Dad came over too. He brought groceries, quietly checked the thermostat, mowed the lawn without being asked. He was trying. Not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent ones. I wasn't ready to let him all the way back in, but I didn't shut the door either. One evening, I pulled the history box out from under the bed. I didn't open it. Just held it for a while, thumb resting on the lid. I couldn't read their apologies yet, but I hadn't thrown them away either. The first time I stood in front of the class, I almost laughed. A year ago, I was managing spreadsheets and tracing offshore accounts. Now I was holding a marker, standing beside a slide that read, "Protecting your family's future, because love shouldn't cost you everything." The room was full of people like my mother, retired teachers, war veterans, single parents, all leaning forward, trying to make sense of online banking, digital scams, and the fine line between trust and blindness. I walked them through it. Not just the mechanics, but the emotional landmines. What to watch for when the danger wears a familiar face. Mom came to my second session. She sat in the back row, nodding thoughtfully, occasionally shooting me a proud little smile. She brought a friend with her, Raymond, from her physical therapy group. He had kind eyes and a habit of bringing her homemade bread. She teased him gently, and he teased her back. I liked him. Caleb was doing better in school. Dana said he was thinking about studying law. He liked facts, hated lies. He reminded me of someone. Dad picked him up from school sometimes now. They'd sit at the kitchen table, heads together over math homework. No big speeches, just quiet effort. Dad and I were still navigating. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But every time he fixed Mom's garden lights or changed the oil in my car, I saw it he was trying. And that counted for something. One evening after class, I stayed late tidying up handouts. I glanced at the slides still glowing on the screen, because love shouldn't cost you everything. It had taken me a long time to believe that again, to realize that protecting yourself doesn't mean giving up on love. It just means being clear about its terms. I didn't win back the family I lost, but I built one rooted in truth, and that was enough.